Good morning, everyone. Today we are set to do another vintage Valentine painting. And this one we've kind of tweaked to be a bit of a kiss the girl scene from The Little Mermaid. So we've got Ariel and Prince Eric here. You can see from the reference image that I moved them closer together and then kind of changed the hair and styling a little bit to match the characters. But I more or less left the rest of it the same. We're going to do a little bit of stuff going around the side after we're all done with this base painting. So without further ado, let's work our way in. So as usual, I'm going to go ahead and start with my background, but because I'm intending for my heart here to be sort of the moon, so I'm going to do this like a light yellow. So I'm going to do this little part first. So when I do this dark night sky, it doesn't overlap or get messed up. So I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to put down some brilliant yellow and white on my palette. And you're going to want your detail brush because we're going to be going around a lot of small details. You can see I kind of put them side by side because I'm not going to mix them totally together on the palette. I'm going to mix them on the canvas because I kind of want some parts of it to be darker than others. So I'm going to start with like putting some yellow down and then putting a little white on my brush and kind of letting it smear. And because we're going to clean up this line when we do our dark sky, I'm not super worried about getting that totally perfect on the outside. It's part of the reason why we're doing it first. And I'm going to kind of add in a little more of my white. And then I'm going to occasionally just alternate between adding yellow and white on my canvas and not necessarily always blending them. You want some variation. I hope by now if you've made Valentine's Day plans if you celebrate with your sweetie. As I've mentioned before, I do not, but I'm not about to take away the fun for everybody else. It's just not for me and my sweetie. And that's okay. I have 1 week until Miss Sci-Fi Bartow, so I need to start memorizing my section that I'm going to do for my talent. I've decided I'm going to read a small portion of like from the Spider to the Fly poem. Come into my parlor, so the spider to the fly, that kind of thing. And I'm going to read this section about because my character, I've named her Widow Fang, and I've kind of based her on me. And she's a fun little character where she's a mutant that is part spider, and she was hatched from an egg from an experimental archaeologist. And I think that's just and it wasn't triggered until the onset of her heart condition. So her genetic mutation came because she developed heart disease. Like clearly I've definitely pulled some inspiration from my own life. Just because it makes it easier to talk about her as a character if it's something that is still personally relatable. I had to look up how to write a beauty contest competition introduction because we had to write an introduction for our character, and these are all non-human, that's the whole thing. It's a beauty pageant for non-humans, and it's a cosplay convention, and I'm super looking forward to entering because this is the first time I'll have actually attended any kind of convention like this. As much as I like to sew and whatnot, I've never attended one. And when this one, is free, and they had this special fun little competition going on, it just made sense to revive a character that I had already dressed up as once, but I'm gonna add some flair to it since this is a beauty pageant. My friend Sherry had taken some really cool pictures of this outfit, but I'm going to change the makeup a little more and maybe add, you know, more going on with my hair or something. We'll see. I've got a week, less than a week to figure it out. So next week's live stream will be canceled for Saturday because I will be getting ready for Miss Sci-Fi Bartow. Oh, my canvas moved on me. My easel moved on me, excuse me, which made my canvas move. And we'll add more detail in here. Just make sure you're always adding some variation in your color when you're putting down your yellow. Variations of straight yellow and, you know, not necessarily ever straight white, but definitely mix in white so that you're not painting a solid like yellow. Because the moon has craters and other sources of light will hit it and make it look different, luminous. We'll add some fun little dots and whatnot all over the moon just because the moon does have that kind of texture to it. We are definitely taking our reference image for a ride for this one. We're having a good time recreating and rethinking it. It's all still sort of the same basic image, but we are customizing it. And if Ariel and Eric aren't your thing, you can always, you know, follow it like the reference image and do it closer to that or change the colors, you know, change the style of the hair to match your hair, you know, change the genders, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's your painting. I'm just here to kind of help you think out the process. All right, so I've got my yellow one, and I'm pretty happy with it for right now. Like I said, we'll do more with it, but for the moment, I count it as good. I use a watercolor pencil to put in my lines, and occasionally my lines get a little bit messy, and sometimes it's easier to just kind of alter them. Oh, I missed a section of a moon here. I'm glad I was looking at it. There's this sliver here that shows, and then there's this sliver here. That would have been embarrassing not to notice until right up until I was doing his shirt. Okay. That's better. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and put in this super dark sky. So we're gonna want phthalo blue. And the glory with phthalo blue is that the more layers you add, the darker it becomes. It has this glorious way of creating a lot of richness for that. I'm gonna use a 5/8 angle brush. And because later I'm gonna be adding like moss and vines and stuff, I'm wanting to keep my lines mostly vertical. And don't forget your sides and your top. If you choose to do this a little bit differently and you wanted to have like a day scene, obviously go for a lighter blue. Or if you're going for a sunset or a sunrise, make sure you use warmer hues. If you're changing this to be something else, you know, be fun to recreate a fun personal memory if you happen to have one on the water like this. And I'm going to add a little water on my brush, and I'm going to trace my moon a little bit because I don't want to mess up my line there. And I'm just letting the brush's angle do the work for me. Ooh, I think one a cute project at some point would be to like do Disney movie posters. That could be fun, like scenes from them. The yellow on the blue made me think of the Little Mermaid anniversary uh poster cover. I've seen a couple of the suggestions being like sidekicks, princesses. You know, I do love my Disney characters. I'm going to be creating my poll for Patreon for choosing my theme for next month. So keep your eye out for that. That should go live probably sometime today. And you'll have until the end of the month. Well, not quite all the way to the end of the month. I'd have to look at a calendar. But whatever that last like Friday is before the end of the month to vote, so that way I can start looking up reference images and hopefully drawing out all of my traceables all at once and then posting a schedule of the live streams I'm gonna do. Other fun ones might be like different princess castles. Some of them could be well, I could redo the female villains as a live stream. I could do landscapes and flowers and country cottages, gardens, you know, that kind of thing as well, being that spring is coming. Or I could do ocean scenes since Florida is most known for that in its spring, going to the ocean. Something like that could be really fun. Ooh, or I could do natural landmarks, waterfalls, rock formations, mountains, or cute little like boutique stores. I'm not as worried about my water lines here, being that these are not like super specific or need to be super specific. Definitely don't get like hung up on making sure your water is absolutely perfect or your wave lines. It won't matter a whole lot. And then over here, And then I'm just going to go over it and make sure all of my kind of lines are going straight up. And I might throw on a quick like lazy second layer in a couple of areas just to create some areas that are a little darker than others. And I'm going to leave that for a minute. And I'm going to start thinking about my water. Now, this is sort of like a lagoon. So I'm probably going to use like a seafoam mixed with turquoise to kind of get the look I'm wanting here. And I'm going to just put them side by side on my palette. And I'm just kind of going to put it on there super lazy and quick. So I'm going to turn my canvas upside down. I'm going to bring back my angle brush. And I'm going to put it to work. I'm going to put both colors on my brush at the same time. And I'm just kind of lazy putting it on. Some parts of it the blue will show more, some parts of it the green will show more. I'm wanting that kind of variation. And at the end of it, we'll want to make sure we smear it sideways because the water is kind of level. And in fact, I might change my water line a tiny bit because I think this is a little more aggressive than I'm really wanting. So I'm thinking it should be a little more tranquil. So in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that now while I'll use my detail brush to kind of shorten this a little bit. Because I think it needs it for what I'm wanting here. I copied this part from the reference image, but for what I'm doing, I'm not super fond of it. So I'm going to paint it out a little bit. And the same on this side. We're going to take it to a little bit less of a chop. There we go. And don't forget to do your sides. And we're going to do more with this water after the first layer dries. For now, we're just kind of identifying where it goes and giving it just that little bit of dimension to start with. I'm going to turn it to the side so I can get the side really good. And then the top really good. And because we've taken that chop down a little bit, I'm going to flip it over so I can finish kind of, it's easier to me to work from it right side up to finish that. Because I'm going to change my chop a little bit. So I don't want it to come up as high. And I may still adjust some of it a little bit more. But for the moment, just trying to get the color in. And I'm not liking how high that one is, so I'm going to take a little bit of white and kind of lighten it up. And then when I go over it, and I go to do the boat in the dark brown, that should disappear. Never be afraid to change your mind. If you're doing this in like a lake, like if you're setting this a little bit differently, your water might be a different color. Or if it's a river, it might have like white in it. You know, you definitely want to be thinking about your, what kind of body of water is this sitting in when you're deciding what kind of color to paint it. And now I'm going to just take a little bit of my green, just the green. And I kind of want to make some suggestions of movement in the water. Not a lot, because this is a relatively still water. But it'll still be noticeable just from the movement of the paint that there's some movement happening there. And we just kind of want to tell that a little bit. We don't need to call it out a lot because there's going to be some more stuff going on down here. But you definitely want to indicate that this is not like impossibly still water. Okay. All right, now we'll go ahead and we'll fill in this bow. And for this, I am going to use dark burnt umber and burnt sienna. The burnt umber is sort of dark and the sienna is kind of light. We're going to give this more texture than they originally designed for this. And I didn't actually finish drawing in my ore all the way, so I'm going to do that. Have it come all the way down in. There we go. And this is the kind of watercolor pencil I use, just an Artist Loft watercolor pencil. All right, and I'm going to stick my burnt sienna down first. And then I'm going to put burnt umber beside it. The 4 round to start with. Actually, I think I'm going to dry my canvas first. It's a little wet and I'm going to stick my wrist down in it if I'm not careful. There we go. And to make this easier for me, I'm going to turn it this way because I'm going to need to create like lines as if, this is made of the wood that it's supposed to be made out of. So first I'm going to go ahead and trace the water line. And kind of get that in. And I'm not going to do the top part of the boat yet because I want to do that separate. But you'll definitely want to keep your brush strokes going side to side on the boat just because that's the way a boat is made and that's the way that the wood grain would go. And I'm not going to get super close up to Ariel with this. I'm going to back off and come back there with a smaller brush. But I want to get the rest of this down in. You want to make sure you don't cover up your oar because we're going to do the oar in a different color. We're going to do the oar in black. In the reference image, they use like a green. And if you were going for a different look, you could do that. But you would not want your boat the same color as your oar regardless, just because then you would have a harder time seeing it and noticing the value of it unless you took it out of his hands entirely. And you could choose to do that. I just decided to leave it in because I liked it there. I'm going to come back in a couple of areas and do a quick little secondary layer. And now I'm going to take my detail brush and I'm going to get a little closer to around her hand and whatnot because I couldn't get as close as I wanted with the foreground. I'm going to use my detail brush to actually go in and add some of this burnt umber. I'm going to kind of go around the side of my canoe here. And I'm going to kind of just add some lines that are going to suggest, the wood grain of this of this boat. And then over here, and for this, we kind of want to follow the line a little bit. And we'll add a little more detail going forward. But for now, I'm just going to do a quick little kind of smear with the burnt sienna. Because I'm trying to create a little bit of an actual physical texture there. Right, now I'm going to rinse my brush. And now I'm actually going to take straight burnt sienna and do this middle layer. And while it's still wet, we're going to add a little bit of white because we're telling about the light hitting the front side of this. We're doing our best to distinguish the front side of a boat and what is, what we're seeing from inside the boat. And we'll add a little more light to that. But for the moment, we're just kind of color blocking. We're getting the idea of it there. Right, now we're going to take burnt umber and we'll do the inside over here. Because this is the kind of shadow that we're seeing on the inside of the boat. So this would be the darkest space. And you don't want to like cover the area where his body is, because his body is going to block the shadow. Because he's inside the boat as well. Oop, I probably shouldn't have done there. But we can cover over that later. The reason we should have done here is because that's where her arm would have been in her hair, But we can cover over that. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and while it's still wet, put a little bit of white over it to help lessen the impact when I paint over it. We all make mistakes, and there is a way to correct all mistakes. Right, I'm going to go ahead and put his oar in now. And because I'm not going to use a whole lot of black, actually we'll use a fair small amount. We'll go ahead and put some on the palette. Because we'll need it for his hair, the oar, and we'll need it for her little vest thing. So we'll go ahead and put a little down. And it's the same rationale with the oar as the wood. The wood would go vertical. And while I've kind of got black on my brush, I'll go ahead and do the rest of the black areas. So I'm going to go ahead and put in his hair. And it's a good thing we've got a little bit of brown going on because we'll need that to help kind of show some natural highlight to his hair. So I'm going to mix some of that burnt umber in the middle of like the folds of his hair. So that way where the areas are really black, it can, that straight black will be more meaningful. And he's got a little bit of hair that wraps kind of around his ear. And I'm going to turn my canvas just to make it a little easier to work with as I'm finishing up the top of his hair. I'm going to work in a little more of that burnt umber in a couple of places. There. And we won't put hers in yet because we're going to put in that light like light shirt that she's got on first. Getting my hand right down in my canvas. You find that's happening to you, it might be a good time to go ahead and dry your canvas. And whenever you're, painting clothes, think about the way in which the fabric would have been cut for it. Like the arm would go straight down, but this part would go across this way, where the cuff is. I'm going to use a little bit of that blue that we used in the water to kind of show the inside of the cuff, because that would be kind of in shadow, so that should be a little darker. And we'll use it to kind of outline it a little bit too. And being that we've got a visible seam here, that should be a little darker as well. Maybe we'll use a little bit of white kind of in the center. And then the rest of the little dress piece. And we're going to go down because here's where I messed up earlier and kind of covered where her body would be inside the boat. So we definitely want to make sure that that gets corrected. If your paint is still wet like mine, now is the time to stop and dry it. All right, now we can kind of finish this area. And as with the other sleeve, we'll use a little bit of that turquoise to kind of outline it. Kind of call out that there is a little something going on. And we'll rim the collar piece here too, the neckline. There. And now I'm going to use a little bit of my black, and we're going to put in her little vest. Because I drew them as sort of kids, I'm leaving her flat intentionally. But if you wanted to change that, all you'd have to do is kind of add a little bump there. Right, and since I've already kind of got this blue on here, I'm going to go ahead and do the bow in her hair. I'm going to outline the sections in the turquoise so you can kind of see where the knots are and add a little bit of texture to her bow. And at this point, it's easier for me to flip it upside down. And again, adding a little bit of that turquoise to kind of differentiate where the knot is. And because there'd be some folds there, that part in the center would be a little darker. And the bit on the bottom would naturally show a little darker as well. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start putting in her hair. And we're gonna put quinacridone scarlet down first. Which is a really nice rich red. You could use cadmium deep red hue, just as long as it's a nice rich red. You don't want, a really light one that looks kind of pinky. You want something kind of on the vibrant side. And you'll want to kind of follow your lines because you want your brush strokes to indicate the direction of her hair. Because that's going to start kind of telling the story of the way her hair kind of goes across her face. And then when you do this part, make sure it all kind of flows back. And she's got a part kind of here. So this part would kind of go in this direction. And then the rest of it would go kind of that way. But by just taking a little bit of time and using that to where you're drawing your lines from, you help identify that that's where the split is in her part without changing the color. We'll add more color there in different volumes and you know, different, not hues, but different lightnesses of it. Because hair has definition and shine. And now the other side of her hair. Once we kind of got her hair placed, now we'll circle back and work a little on Prince Eric. He's actually got a little bit of a red belt that shows here, so we'll put that in real quick. And his kind of dark blue pants beneath it. There's black. Hold on a second. Let's see. It is blue. All right. I was right. I was thinking I was crazy. So we'll use the blue from the sky. Just because this is barely showing. And while his shirt is white, we can't leave it like this. We need to kind of indicate that something is going on. Oh, I didn't quite get all the way in there earlier. There. So I'm going to use gray to help me. I'm going to put gray inside the cuff where we're seeing the inside of his sleeve here. And the same here. And then over here. And we're also kind of use it to help outline his shirt and collars. Oh, that was what that was. That was a collar. Okay. I was trying to figure out why I left it there blank. And now I know why. It's his collar, because that's the V-neck part. So we're just kind of covering our pencil lines with the gray. And we're going to mix the white into it, so that way it kind of creates a little bit of a gradient effect. And now I'm going to start plotting in my white. And I'm going to intentionally smear it with my gray. And then add a little more white in the middle. And then same with the sleeve, with the collar here. Just kind of filling it back in white. Oh, missed a part here. And then again, in the very center of every shape, adding a little more of the plain white in the very center. And then now for the collar. And kind of adding in here. We'll go back and add a little bit of that dark gray back to the collar line, just to help it kind of be more noticeable that it's there. And then you need to put a little bit of it under here. And I clipped my oar a tiny bit, so I'm going to just cover that back up. There. Right now I'm ready to start adding the first layer. My skin tone, I like to use kind of a whited out Naples yellow. It's pretty kind of a peach color all on its own. And because it's very thin, as all yellows are, I can cover up where my lines are, where I drew in my face, and I can still see where the lines are. If you wind up with some rogue lines, you can always clean them up afterwards. All right, now we're going to paint in his chest. Since his shirt is a V-neck. And his hands. Okay, now I'm going to do her skin. Wrist. And then her hand. All right, and while that's kind of drying, I'm going to go around and check on areas of my canvas where the paint didn't totally cover as well as I'd like. So I'm just doing a quick touch up on some areas. And I'm going to go ahead and use up the rest of this blue paint I've got on my canvas and give myself a nice little dark layer here. And I'm just kind of darkening up my background a little bit because I really want like a nice dark sky. Okay, I'll be right back. I gotta answer the door. Give me just a moment. Thank you for being patient. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a dry. Okay, now we'll go ahead and start kind of putting in her face. So we're going to take our black and we're going to do an upside down U and kind of fill in there. There's a few little lashes. Again, an upside down U. And another one that goes in. Fill it in. And then some lashes. We'll use the red from her hair to put in a little bit of an eyebrow. And we'll also add a little quick little layer where her part is to kind of deepen that section. And the idea of, where there's multiple layers. just kind of darkening it out. Okay. We are going to use a little bit of our burnt sienna to kind of draw an outline of where her nose is and a smile. She's too young for lipstick as a child, so we're not putting lipstick on her. And for Eric's eyes, his are a nice round shape. And they have the pupils kind of coming up in this direction. I don't know that I necessarily like that, but we'll see. We'll go ahead and fill in the whites. We'll give him a few lashes too. And the same for his nose. Just a little bit of a little bit of burnt sienna. And we're going to use the burnt sienna to kind of separate out his hands for the fingers. We'll kind of outline the skin a little bit. And we'll mix a little bit of our lighter color back in. That got a little out of hand, so I'm going to add a lot back in. Flip it over. We're just kind of outlining the skin a tiny bit. I'm going to rinse off my brush. That got a little bit clumpy. I don't like that. Let me just smooth that out. Okay. For some reason I picked up some paint and it got transferred there. So, oh, it did it in a couple of places. All right, let's go ahead and fix that. A little bit of white. And then a little bit of yellow. Same over here. and I'm going to put a little water on my brush and get into the burnt sienna. And we're just kind of outlining kind of where the knuckle is. There. I have to dry that to correct it. It's just too wet. Oh, I picked up and transferred blue all over the place. Easy fix. Okay. We've got our base layer of our painting in. In theory, at this point, I suppose you could call yourself done. But we're not going to do that, because that would be too easy. Instead, we are going to add a little bit of drama to our water. Grab my 1-inch or my 1 brush. And we're going to create kind of some light here. That's where the moon is, so that's where the light is. And we're going to put some fun little like fishes in there. And I think I'm going to grab a piece of chalk so that way if I muck it up, it's easy to fix. So there's this scene where they've got fish spurting up water. And I don't want it to get in the way of where they're at, so I'm going to keep them way off here to the side. So there's a little fish mouth, a little fish body, a little fish body, and maybe there's a flipper there. Maybe there's a flipper there. And we're going to say that this water is going to shoot up here. Like that. And we'll do another one on this side. And we'll have this fish coming from like more of a front direction. So it's going to come up from that mouth and kind of go like that. Actually, I don't like that. We'll have it just mirror the other one. So we're going to do that. But I think I will swap these around a little bit. Because I don't want it to be the same on both sides. I think I want the taller one on this side and the shorter one on that side. All right, So I'm going to say that these fishies are probably the same color as her hair. I'm going to fill in the fishies, just general shape first. And now we're going to kind of define it a little bit. So we're going to use some white here for their little fish lips. And we're going to say that his fin here is a lighter color. And a little bit of something going there. And then we'll give him a little eye. And we will use kind of a lighter blue than the fish for the water it's spurting up, because it can't be like straight white. It can be mixed with white, but it can't be like a straight white. And I think we're going to add a couple little dots on the end. Rinse off my brush, and I'm going to clean my chalk line off a little bit while I'm waiting on that to dry, just so it makes it easier for me to kind of see what I'm looking at. And now I'm going to do the other side. Again, I'm going to fill it all in that light blue. And then kind of a fin there. All right, so we've got our basic shape in. We'll rim the mouth in white. And then I'm going to do my fin in white. And it kind of is here. And then it's got another one kind of here. and sort of this one coming up on its back. Oh, that one got a lot of hand. There we go. Put a little bit of our darker blue kind of inside the mouth. And a little bit of the dark blue for the eye. And we're going to mix a little into this light blue. Just for some dimension. All right, and now we're going to add his little waterfall on his side. And so I don't put my hand in my paint, I'm going to turn it upside down. And I'm going to mix a little bit of the blue in. Okay, and then a couple of little dots in the ends. Oop, my easel moved and got away from me. Use a little bit of water to clean up my chalk line while I'm waiting for it to dry. Right, now we're going to use a little bit of a sponge to create some fairy stuff going on. When I find my sponge. If I find my sponge. Right, so we're not doing it with a sponge. We're going to do this a little bit differently than I originally anticipated. And that's okay. There's more than one way to do this. I'm going to put a little bit of white on my round brush, my one round. And I'm just gonna create little circles. And have it be sort of randomly placed. We're creating our space for our fireflies. This is the magic of the moment. I think that's kind of enough there. And now I'm going to take my little 1 rounds and over each of the little dots, I'm going to kind of spiral, starting in the center and kind of spiraling just a little out. We're kind of telling the story of like this radiating light. On the ones where you've got over the moon, you may want to do this with white instead of with yellow, just so that way it kind of shows a little more. And now I'm going to do a couple with just like white around it over here on the actual moon, just because these are a little harder to see. Okay, so we've got a little bit of our fireflies happening. And we'll add some of our like little dogwoods, I think, as well. We'll use some of that dark brown. And these will be kind of things that are happening in the foreground. So I'm going to pull back out my 1 round. And I'm going to use my burnt umber. And we're just kind of creating a couple of like these little catwood shapes here that Sebastian uses as a microphone. And then make sure it extends on the bottom. And we're going to do a couple of these. It might be easier to draw in your circle, your oval first. You don't want them all going in the same direction because these are things that really flow with the wind. And I think I might do one more kind of lower down. Right, and make sure you continue it down on the bottom of your canvas. And then we're going to do the other side now. And I think on this side, it's going to be more about like some like dark leaves maybe that we don't see really well off to the side. Or maybe we'll throw in some on the other side as well. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll add a little bit over here. Some dark leaves of sorts, some grass that's happening. We'll let it come off the side a little bit. And we'll do the other side. Should have a little bit of grass. Oh, I can see where I missed a little bit earlier. Let me fix that real quick. There. Add a little bit of green grass. And we'll add just a little piece here. And flip it over. Get the underside. And let's put in a single dogwood on the other side. Let's have it be one that comes up about here. And have it come down right in front of here. There. All right, I'm pretty happy now with my bottom. Got a little bit of drama going on. Now I'm going to dry my canvas so I can do some drama up in the sky. And I'm going to use my ruler and my chalk to add a few lines of like seaweed. And I'm thinking they're going to go kind of right between here. I think I'm going to have another piece going maybe right towards the side. And a couple of loose kind of pieces happening here. Maybe something happening here. There, okay. And I'm thinking I'm gonna do this in the phthalo green as well, because it'll show up nice and dark on the blue. I'm just gonna paint the lines real fast. Right, so we've got our base lines in. And now we're just going to use our brush to add a little bit of leaves. And for me, it'll be easier to turn this upside down to do this. And I'm just going to be making little ovals. These won't be super noticeable because they're so dark, but it adds some extra texture and interest, even if it is buried in the background. It adds something meaningful to the overall piece. And it's very important that your leaves are tilted down, since they'd be, falling, hanging, and that's what gravity would want to happen. It would be looking for these leaves to be kind of trying to make their way down to the ground. And I think once we're done that, I might just add a couple of little dots and add the color to their eyes. And then I think I'm ready to say that this piece is finished. And we're almost done with our leaves. I'm going to use my dotting tool to add a few small little dots all over the moon and kind of around my fireflies and in my sky. So I'm just adding some little white dots in random spots around the moon. And now I'm going to take my yellow and do a couple of little, very sporadic, kind of just around where the sparkles, where my fireflies are. We're talking about a little bit of residual glow. Happy with that. I am just going to add a little more to her hairline here. Yeah. Right, and blue for their eyes. Just that little smidge. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are done. I'm going to go ahead and sign my name at the bottom. Okay. It was good to see you at the easel. Have a lovely rest of your day.